Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Melanin Stories Matter. I'm Melissa Reeves. I am the producer and I'll be co-host tonight of tonight's show, where we're going to be exploring the topic of something very important, and it's environmental racism. And we are so grateful that you are joining us, spending your evening with us, and we really hope that the content that you hear tonight is something that stays in your heart and stays with us. We're going to be hearing from 6 storytellers: Pastor Abel Arroyo, Arlene Tatum, David Hu, Stefanie Smith, Dashawn Glymph, and Mr. Viet Mai. And we could not be happier about it. I also have a co-host with me, and I'm excited to have her. It's Cristina Diaz Rivera. And Cristina is not only a part of my marketing team that makes this happen, she's genius, but she's also on our advisory board of Melanin Stories Matter. And I'm so honored, Cristina, to be sharing this stage with you. So welcome.
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening to everyone as well. And welcome to our latest show, where the theme is environmental racism. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what that means. So often we talk about how racism is systemic. We're pointing to policies, rules, and laws that are put in place on purpose to make life harder for those who live there, while benefiting the pockets of those who put them in place. In most cases, these laws and policies target communities where people of color live. Examples of this are the poisoned waters of Flint, Michigan, and the Hopi Nation, how disease spreads in the projects, the Dakota pipeline, or the building of processing plants near neighborhoods, causing cancer and breathing problems for the residents nearby. We see it in how any of the territories owned by the U.S. are left to fend for themselves or receive disproportionate support to recover or build a sustainable economy due to all the hoops and the red tape that are placed upon them. So we hope that as we move forward with the show, that we can lift up these stories and celebrate victories too against environmental racism, and lift up environmental justice, such as the naming of Deborah Ann Hayland of the Laguna Pueblo Nation, serving as the 54th United States Secretary of the Interior.
Yeah, I know.
So before we get started, there are a few things we'd like to address. First, although the theme of our show is environmental racism, given certain factors, only the first 2 of our stories will fall into the definition of the theme. Part of the reason of this is because 2 of our storytellers that we had been in conversation with for the show were not available for this date. And although they're not able to be with us tonight, we want to mention them with the hopes of bringing them on in a future show. They are Waylon P. Pahona of the Hopi Nation, who we heard in one of our shows last year, and he'll be bringing us an update on his journey to raise awareness on the water crisis in the Hopi Nation. And second, we also have a good friend of one of today's storytellers, Miss Angela Kinlaw, a woman who's in relationship with the residents of the 9th North Ward of New Orleans. And this community is struggling with the environmental impact of what Hurricane Katrina pulled out of the ground not too long ago, and the health effects on that community today. So that said, and given the temperature of the nation in these last few weeks, there were stories that came to us that we felt the need to hold space for. And as such, we decided to include them in this show. Because some of our stories include traumatic events, language, and violence, we will be sharing a trigger warning before each story. And if you feel triggered, and need to step away, feel free to do so, to mute for a moment and come back to us once the story has passed. Please make yourself comfortable. Open your hearts and minds as we begin today's show. And we will start each story as well with an environmental principle we want to bring forward, presented by the spoken word artist, Mr. Viet Mai. And now, Melissa, I pass it on to you with the remaining house rules of the day.
Yes, thanks. Thanks so much. Yeah, we will be exploring environmental racism from a variety of angles, most definitely. So thank you. And just for some of you who might be at your first Melanin Stories Matters show, this show is all about highlighting the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We all have melanin. I have melanin. It's just that my melanin has come with a little bit of white privilege, and that has made me a bit uncomfortable as we've been witnessing these things that we've seen on TV in the last year. And so that's the birth and the heart and the spirit of this show, because we do believe that storytelling can change hearts one at a time. And that's our mission, to increase allyship and to have our diversity celebrated. It would be so boring if we were all the same. And so these stories are here for you to step into someone else's shoes. Housekeeping. Okay, so we have a chat box, and please, these storytellers have worked so hard on their stories. Let them know after they've done their story, you know, like, yay, clap, clap, you know, however you want to express yourself. It's really very much appreciated. So please have at it. Unless you're a troll, this is a place of safety and coolness. If you're a troll, we will bounce you out of here. Okay, so no time for that. Giving. We're very much about giving. And so we have proceeds of part of our ticket sales will be going to greenaction.org, but also there's some organizations that are near and dear to each one of our storytellers. And so we will promote up there and lift up their links so that if you could give $5, you know, to that particular organization in support of the storyteller, that is so cool and so grateful. We're so grateful. So that's great. We also, let's see, storytellers. Oh, we are a grassroots organization. We're as grassroots as it gets. And we will offer a tip jar. So if you like what you're seeing and you want to give a little bit more, we try to do what's right and support our artists and keep the lights on. And so a tip jar is going to be available. You'll see it from PayPal. And then we will disperse those amongst our cast. So thank you in advance if you feel that giving heart. So very good. All right. And we also want to thank our sponsors. So we've had some really amazing sponsors, including BJG Consulting and Christina's photography business, as well as KNKX, which is the NPR station here in Seattle. Founders Live and Story Jam have also been wonderful, wonderful support. So thank you to all of you. And then we are then going to, for the show, what we're going to do is we're about to start, but what you're going to do is you're going to hear Mr. Viet Mai deliver one of those principles. Okay, so we're going to hear him do a principle. Then one of us will come in and introduce one of the storytellers. They'll tell their story, and then we'll do a little interview and hopefully promote their organization and raise some money, all with good hearts intended. Okay, so that being said, let's start the very first act of our show, okay? So thank you.
Environmental justice affirms the need for urban and rural ecological policies to clean up and rebuild our cities and rural areas in balance with nature, honoring the cultural integrity of all our communities and providing fair access for all to the full range of resources.
Okay, our first storyteller is coming all the way from Ireland. He's made us international. And he actually was born in Lima, Peru. And he is now finding home in Ireland, but he is no stranger to these journeys. He's an ordained pastor of the Lutheran Church, and Abel embraces ministry and preaches God's love as a matter of justice. You can find him channeling his holy chaos these days as part of the board of directors of an extraordinary Lutheran ministries and an organization that advocates the support of ordination for the LGBTQA community into the pastoral ministry. As one of the creators, I love this, the Chaotic Bisexual Text Study, a podcast about two bisexual ministers and their musings about the Bible, theology, liturgy, and how they decolonize and queer their faith one Bible reading at a time. I just love that creativity. So please welcome Reverend Abel Arroyo with his story that we call Hands of Character.
I grew up in Lima, Peru, very close to the historic center. And what you should know about the historic center is that there's always something to experience. You either have these beautiful public gardens with the smells of flowers and wood and fresh cut grass, or the smell of traditional sweets that are being sold in some corner somewhere. Or the smell of incense, because there are so many churches, chapels and cathedrals, so many in fact, that it isn't unlikely that you will walk by one of them. So there are the smell of incense because there are so many churches and chapels and cathedrals, and so many in fact, that it's unlikely that you wouldn't walk by one of them. But I grew up close to that, where the working class lives. On your way there, there's a bridge that you must walk over, where you can feel the sacred tension that the bridge holds historically. Because for the historic Lima to be beautiful and colorful, and for the smells of flowers and sweets and incense to be there, there is someone who must plant those flowers, bake those sweets, and burn that incense. And that's where I grew up, with the people who make all those things happen. But the smells and the sensations and the experiences across the bridge were not quite the same. Instead of flowers, you smell fumes from buses and cars that moved the masses to where they needed to go. The smell of garbage instead of sweets. The smell of piss instead of incense. It was not the Lima from across the bridge. But that's where home was. And at home, the matriarch, the absolute queen that was my grandma. We called her Mamama. And as a child, probably 5 or 6, somewhere around there, I remember this figure waking up early every morning, starting her routine that involved creams and makeup for her face, and brushing and spraying her hair and her nails, trimming and filing and retouching her nail polish. And it was a whole production. And I don't think any of us really knew how many steps there were to it. But as the baby of the house, there was something that she made a point of sharing with me so that I would introduce it in my own routine. And that was to keep my nails clean. Being poor doesn't mean to be dirty. That's what she would say every time. And she was determined to teach every single one of her grandkids that where we came from was not going to define who we were. Hand washing was a ritual, sacred, important, because for her, and by extension, for us, that was always a way to defy who the world around us told us we were. I was probably 13 when my family decided to move to San Jose, Costa Rica. And the first impression you get when you are there is this very green, vibrant, fresh country. San Jose is in the middle of a valley. So you have all these smells of trees and soil and rain, which for someone born in the desert like myself was a daily delight. But here too, to keep the city clean and fresh and the smells of the forest could come through, all the other stuff had to go somewhere. I went to school in a city called Desamparados, and down the street from my school, there was a landfill, Rio Azul. And at first, as a 13-year-old, I just thought, well, trash does have to go somewhere. But then I started noticing that it wasn't just trash that went that direction. It was also people, families. It was also whole communities that lived among the trash and off of the waste that kept the rest of San Jose green and fresh and vibrant. They were my classmates. They were my friends. I remember going to school every morning and seeing this long road that went right into the landfill and seeing the crowds coming and going, kind of like a procession. It was another bridge, another sacred space holding the tension between the beauty of San Jose and the work and the people that took to keep it beautiful. Grandma died when I was 16, and I still remember that flight home. It was very tense, holy, it was endless. And the whole time, one of the few things that I could do to keep myself calm and composed and moving forward was to keep my fingernails clean. At 18, my family moved to Los Angeles, California. And at first, the very first thing that comes to mind when you think of LA is usually the Walk of Fame and the Hollywood sign, the lights and the crowds and the overpriced food, and to be quite frank, the overpriced everything. It's glamour and beauty and success. It's a city of marketable people. But I didn't live in LA proper. I lived in North Hollywood. And to get to and from, you have to drive the 101, which became another bridge holding that sacred tension between the marketable people and the people who make them marketable. North Hollywood is one of those neighborhoods that feels dusty all the time, but it's also this unique crossroad of urban, suburban, and industrial. You constantly hear the noise of cars and trucks and planes coming and going from the Burbank airport and the nearby movie lots and warehouses. As I grew older, as I continued to move around, I continued to find more and more of these bridges holding sacred tension between what is and what makes them be. I am 39 years old now. And a big part of my vocation is to go over those bridges daily, sacred, and tense. When I hear about environmental racism, to me, it's not about this concept of an armchair discussion happening in the ivory tower of academia, but it's a part of my daily commute. Environmental racism is what creates the chasm those bridges are built for. Is the very nature of capitalism that creates those breaches. What keeps us separated. What puts the trash where we live so that others can visit the other side. What poisons and trashes our land so that others can live in it. It's what creates the us and them. While at the same time trying to make those bridges invisible, trying to erase that sacred tension and minimize the lives and stories of those who must cross them every day. We can see this pattern not just everywhere we go, but everywhere we are. I am now 39. I'm a pastor. And a big part of what I do is hold hands with people crossing those bridges. I still remember my mama telling me, just because we're poor doesn't mean that we have to be dirty. But whenever I hold hands, whenever I get to serve someone, whenever I sit with them in those holy moments of tension, I look at their hands and at their nails, and regardless of if they're dirty or they're clean, regardless of nails or dirt or cuts, they all tell a story. Those hands and fingernails tell stories of dignity, of journeys, and of hard work. They tell our stories and are a living proof of our daily commute across those bridges.
Wow. Yeah. What a beautiful story. So many images, Abel. I mean, I know your sound was a little light at the beginning. It's all fine. That's the internet. That's the fun times of the internet. Yay! We got our first tech thing out of the way. But at the very beginning, you were describing the beauty of Lima, and then it's juxtaposed with the bridge of tension, and that the neighborhoods of the people that make that beautiful world, and how the living conditions are greatly different. It's maddening. I remember once during rehearsal, you said it's how the brown people's neighborhoods are not cared for. That stuck with me. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you saw that.
a racial element to it, right? And because there is this us and them in capitalism, in the world in general, right? There is always going to be a place where there's someone taking care of everything else, and that's usually people of color. Wherever we go, like in the United States, we have racism within communities of color. We have what's called colorism, that works in the same way. You know, it's like the lighter you are, there is this like oppression scale almost, as weird as that sounds.
Yes, actually, that was something that was brought up in the first story by Cristina Diaz Rivera. She explored the colorism within her own family. But what can we do? Like, what, in your opinion, can we do to try to clean up and be more respectful to all of our neighborhoods? Because this is clearly it is environmental racism, it's white supremacy, it's disrespect. What's something that you would like to see happen for us to start to turn this around?
As a person who works in the community, right? I want to see people stop holding the communities as if they are responsible of what's happening. Because there are systems in place that make all of this what it is. There are corporations, there are, it's our system. It's what we breathe, is capitalism, is, the Nestle, like draining our aquifers. It's Coca-Cola just dumping waste, and GM just dumping waste everywhere we go, and it's overconsumption. So it's not about just the person who goes and recycles or doesn't recycle. It's about the 70% of the global waste created by corporations. And that waste has to go somewhere, and people live there. We live there.
That landfill image that you explained in Costa Rica, in San Jose, where like it's a landfill and people are mining it, trying to find things that they can sell. Kids are playing around it, and homes were in it. That's why your image is a picture of a house on top of that landfill. There were so many images that we could have gone with. We could have gone with bridges. We could have gone with hands. Your story is just beautiful, told, and it's important to be heard. So your organization is the Southeast Environmental Task Force, which is, you want to tell us real quick about that?
Yes, they are.
That was the image.
Chicago. And what they are fighting right now, what they are fighting for right now, is to stop a metal processing plant from getting permits to keep dumping toxic waste into the ground of the South Side. And of course, this doesn't happen in a white neighborhood, to be quite plain about it. This happens in neighborhoods of people of color, specifically Latino neighborhoods, and we are currently fighting this fight to keep them from poisoning our people. You would think that it would be common sense, but for capitalism, for industries, for companies, it isn't. And we need to fight for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope everyone is hearing this and making decisions about how we how we create our policies within our cities too, you know, the fairness of the budgets that go in and whatnot. So we could keep going, and we're going to keep going, but we're going to bring in another storyteller. I just want to thank you. Happy birthday, by the way. It was his birthday yesterday. It's 2 a.m. in Ireland. But we're so grateful to have you, and you can go relax.
Having me, for sure.
Huh?
Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. And you'll come back, because at the end of the show, we're going to bring the cast back and you can ask questions. He might be asleep, so we'll have to wake him up. Okay, go relax. Thank you, Abel. Thank you so much. Okay, next up we have Christina, who's going to be bringing on our second storyteller, and we will hear from, again, Mr. Viet Mai on the next level of environmental justice.
Environmental justice affirms the sacredness of Mother Earth, ecological unity, and the interdependence of all species, and the right to be free from ecological destruction. Environmental justice.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It is my privilege and my pleasure to welcome our next storyteller, a fellow Caribbeaner, Arlene Tatum. She comes to us tonight from Queens, New York, but by way of Charlotte Amalie St. Thomas of the U.S. Virgin Islands. She is a songstress, a poet, a baker, a crafter, an overall wonderful human being, and she has the strongest ties to family. So it is, without further ado, I would like to present her with her story, Beyond the Eye of the Hurricane. And before I do, if there are any of our watchers who feel triggered or have natural storm trauma, please be advised. Take it away, Arlene.
Peace and blessings to everyone. My story is one that many people can probably relate to from a first-hand experience. On a clear day, you can see St. Croix from my apartment. It is southwest of St. Thomas, and when the sky is clear and the Caribbean Sea is that beautiful aquamarine that everyone associates with the Caribbean, you can look straight across the water and see the outline of the hills of my sister island in the distance. But on this day, the sky is gray, the clouds are gathering, the Caribbean Sea is flat and motionless like a mirror, reflecting the clouds that are gathering overhead. Being in the Caribbean, you're no stranger to hearing that there are hurricanes or tropical storms heading your way. That's just the way of life. Hurricane season is every year, from April to October, even lately running into November. So when you hear a storm is coming, you prepare yourself. You gather your supplies, your batteries, your canned foods, your water, your toilet paper. You get your essential things that you need because you may have to shelter in place, which is what my mom and I did in preparation for this storm. But this storm's not a normal storm. It's different. The data and the weather services have all categorized it as the top of the scale, a category 5. You can't get a higher storm rating than that. So even though we've been through storms and we know what to expect, there was something different about Irma. Most storms come at night when everyone is safely tucked away and they can sleep it through and just wake up the next morning and see what has happened while they were asleep. But not Irma. Irma decided to come during the day. It was about 12 in the afternoon when I first noticed that the rain, which normally goes from east to west, was now going from west to east. That's not normal. Typically, The rain follows the same pattern as the sun. So my mom is scurrying around trying to secure her things, your important documents, your birth paper, your driver's license, your passport, your electronic devices, family photo albums, the things that would be irreplaceable once you've been in a storm. And I'm saying, Mom, you should have done all of this already. This storm is here. We need to get somewhere safe because look at outside. The wind is blowing. The building is shaking. The rain is going in the wrong direction. We need to get out of here. Where's Asher? Have you seen that cat? You know, she likes to hide under your bed. Do you have what you need to secure? Because we got to go. So I grab her and the cat, and we go into my sister's bathroom, which is the only space in our house that doesn't have any windows. And we shut the door. And those same windows, where on a clear day we can look out and see St. Croix, have now imploded. There's glass everywhere. All the windows on that south side, all the windows on the west side facing our airport. The wind has now sucked in and sucking out everything in its path. It destroyed the bathroom mirror. Our shower curtain was nowhere to be found. And the kitchen cabinets are going like this. And the glasses are flying. The plates are breaking. The pots and pans are rattling. What is going on? It's 2:00 in the afternoon. My mom doesn't think that we're going to be safe here anymore. So now she wants to go downstairs. How do we get down there? We push the door. Both of us, because of this wind that's now full access and free reign to our apartment. We get outside, glancing at the damage that's being done, and the fridge is wedged into the doorframe of the kitchen where we need to pass to get outside. How? How can wind move a refrigerator? But it does, and it did, and now we can't pass. So we have to go back the way we came, through my sister's bedroom, out her exit door, down to the second level of our apartment building. But the vortex from that very wind won't let us pass. And even if we could have gotten through that front door, there's a tree blocking our stairs. So we can't get down to the car. We have to go back upstairs. So Mom and I and the cat, through the wind and that vortex, go back upstairs, back into my sister's bathroom, and with the presence of mind, grab her mattress and pull it in after us. And no sooner than we do that, the ceiling collapses because the rain has joined the wind and has saturated all the plaster in the ceiling. So it falls on top of us, on top of that mattress. My cat that's usually so vocal, she hasn't made a sound this whole time. She's under the sink, hiding. You wouldn't even know she was there. My mom and I are now praying and singing songs that we're trying to remember just to keep calm while the floor is vibrating and the walls are shaking and that wind is howling through every open window in our apartment. We went into that bathroom on Wednesday. We didn't come out until Friday. And when we did, I didn't recognize my island. I didn't recognize the landscape because there were no leaves. That wind whipped up the salt from the sea and scalded all of the trees on all of the hillsides until they were brown. The iguanas are clinging. You can see from one end to the other. Who is going to help us? How do we get out of this situation? The airport's destroyed. Where is help going to come from? And then to add insult to injury, 2 weeks to the day after Hurricane Irma passes over our island, here comes her girlfriend Maria, who is also a Category 5 hurricane. Where are you going? I'm sure no one invited you. But what do? We haven't even begun to recover from Irma. Who's going to help us now?
Let's take a big breath after that one. Thank you so much, Arlene. I have to admit, I wasn't listening this time. I heard your story in the rehearsal, and as your neighboring islander, it touches home really, really deeply. And when you say things like, where was help going to come from? Who was going to help us? Or just how you use time in your story, like between knowing and not knowing. Thank you for sharing those things. For our audience, you and I both live on territories, but a lot of people who live on the mainland United States aren't familiar with the U.S. territories, which are Puerto Rico, the U.S. VI, which are 3 islands, American Samoa, and Guam.
It's 4 now.
4? Okay.
It's 4. They added Water Island.
Oh my goodness.
So,
there you
yeah,
go.
We have 4.
Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about St. Thomas? Like, is there something that you'd like them to know about being a U.S. Virgin Island? Sorry.
The main thing that people need to remember is that we are U.S. We are no less American than Puerto Rico. We're no less American than somebody from Florida or somebody from New Orleans or somebody that was even in Long Island where they had Sandy or, I think that because we're a territory, we get overlooked quite often when there are natural disasters because we're just a little rock in the sea and our population is not as big as, say, Florida or New Orleans or New York. But that doesn't mean that the destruction and the devastation that we experience is any less than when it happens, when a storm makes landfall on the continent. A lot of times those storms have diminished somewhat, as hard to believe as that is, because by the time they've passed over our islands, they've lost a lot of their steam. And it's not just in the U.S. territories. When the Bahamas had that catastrophic storm, who helped them? Who remembered them? We only see the devastation afterward. We never hear who is helping, who's on the ground that's there, that puts out, that has that helping hand to lift people up. And so there's kind of a love-hate relationship between the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico because it seems like, to us, help stops at Puerto Rico. We're like the stepchild after the fact. Puerto Rico gets more help, more aid, or at least it seems that way. And that's not because they're louder or they have more people. That's just the way that it comes across. So it seems very unfair, but we are US. We're just as US as everybody else. We're just not a state.
Yeah. And I agree. We don't get a lot of help. We make a lot of noise. But the U.S. Virgin Islands do get overlooked and they do get forgotten often. I won't argue with you there.
And it's not a far throw to compare the word territory to slave.
Mm.
It's almost like, or property, rather.
Yeah.
So it's like to say one property seems to have more value than another property, but there's still that sense of ownership. And if something belongs to you, you should take pride in it. You should want to see it be at its best, and do whatever you can to make it its best. Because when everything is green and beautiful, everybody wants to come down and go to the beach. But when it's brown and dry, nothing.
Yes.
So
So speaking about helping others, the organization that we're lifting up to support for you this tonight is globalcitizen.org, and they are assisting those who are affected in St. Vincent by the volcanic eruptions. Is that correct?
yes. Again, when storms and natural disasters happen anywhere in the world, it's a tragedy. But because many of the islands are just that, they're islands, they're little specks on the map, a lot of times when things happen, people don't know about it. So even though I'm not affiliated with this organization, and I don't personally know anybody in St. Vincent, that doesn't make it any less traumatic for me to hear that all of these people are being displaced and they might never get to go back to their homes because of this volcano. So my heart goes out to them, and I just felt led to lift up that organization so they can get some help.
Thank you so much, Arlene. Well, you've done a wonderful job. Take a deep breath and you can go rest. And we'll see you again at the end for the post Q&A, where there will likely be some questions. Thank you,
I
Arlene.
will be here. Thank you.
Environmental justice calls for the education of present and future generations, which emphasizes social and environmental issues based on our experience and appreciation of our diverse cultural perspectives. Environmental.
Hi. Well, that was pretty powerful from Arlene and Christina. Our next storyteller is one of those versions of how we're unpacking the word of environmental racism, and I think that quote was really powerful for this. Our next storyteller, especially in the world of Stop Asian Hate, this is a current event that we want to also lift up. And David, who is from the Bronx, and we met on Facebook, and he's an amazing storyteller. He's on The Moth, he's on Risk Podcast, and he's just a phenomenal person. And I'm super, super honored to have you in our show. And I would love everyone to welcome, as we have David tell us the story that he calls Asian American History X. Take it away, David.
Thank you, Melissa. Can everyone hear me? Mom and Dad immigrated to New York from Hong Kong in 1970 for a better life. With only $500 in their pocket, they found an amazing apartment on Valentine's Avenue in the Bronx. Little did they know, Valentine's Avenue was called the Heroin District. During that time, New York City was plagued with crime, drugs, and violence. And I remember back in the early 80s, when I was 7 years old, born and raised in the Bronx, the lobby of our building was like a fucking zoo, just chock full of shit and puke, and the smell made me nauseous all the time. As soon as we walked into the apartment and Mom and Dad locked the doors, they rarely let me outside to play. Growing up, I felt sheltered and alone because there were no kids my age to hang out with, and we were literally the only Chinese family in a predominantly Hispanic and Black neighborhood. Yo, we stood out like a yellow box of Whitman's assorted chocolates. And I spent my days staring outside the window of our second floor apartment or watching TV in our living room down the hall. And outside, I would always see the older kids looking mad fresh with their members only jackets, dark blue Levi jeans, high top pony kicks, laughing, giggling, smoking blunts, and drinking 40 ounces of apple juice called Old E and Crazy Horse. Whoa, what a cool name for apple juice. I really wish Mom bought me that brand. and I wanted to be just like them, the Jackson 5. And I begged Mom and Dad to let me hang out with them, but like a broken record, no good, stay home, watch TV, okay? I'm like, yo, chill. And that's what I did. I sat down and I watched TV. And one of my favorite TV shows growing up was High Feather. It's a series about a bunch of white kids that go to summer camp. Oh my God. I got so inspired watching all those kids swimming in a lake, singing songs over a campfire, and roasting hot dogs. That shit was mad chill. And I wanted to be just like them. And one afternoon, I walked up to Mom. I was like, Mommy, can you take me camping? She said, okay. So she goes to the bedroom, takes out a queen-size bed sheet from the dresser drawer, and she pitches this huge tent in our living room. We ordered Chinese takeout and watched Silver Spoons. Another afternoon, I walked up to Dad. Daddy, can you take me fishing? Okay. We walk into the bathroom, and my dad fills up the bathtub with water, and he dumps a can of sardines in there. Looking back at it today, Mom and Dad provided me a fun and safe environment to be a kid. However, things turned for the worse one night. I'm standing in the kitchen with my mom, and I hear someone approach the door of our apartment and put the key in the lock. And my mom walks up to the door and looks through the peephole, and it's my dad. And she's like, Marcia, what's wrong? How come you can't open the door? In the background, I hear footsteps, and they're getting louder and louder. And my mom's like, what happened? What? Oh my God, hiya. And I hear someone scream, give me your fucking money or I'll cut your throat, you fucking chink, followed by pounding noises and screaming as my mom stared through that peephole in fear. The noises soon dissolve, and I hear the footsteps, and they fade throughout the night. And that key finally turns in the lock, and my dad rushes into the apartment, and my mom shoves the door shut. My dad is as white as a ghost. He's shaking like a leaf. He's out of breath. His white button-down dress shirt is ripped, untucked, and covered in dirt, and I see him holding his fist in his hand, and I could see blood dripping throughout the knuckles of his fingers onto our kitchen floor. And I stand there, and I stare at it, not in fear, and obviously not in amusement. It's a lot to process for a 7-year-old past his bedtime. And I remember the last thing my mom said was, damn it, go to sleep, don't make trouble, okay? And I see my mom wrapping my dad's hand up with a kitchen towel like a boxer during halftime. After that incident, we moved to a predominantly white neighborhood called Pelham Parkway in the Bronx. My parents bought a house. I got my own room and a backyard surrounded by trees. It was a picture-perfect dream that soon became a picture-perfect nightmare. When I was 13, I was walking to school, and I hear someone scream, you fucking chink, go back to China and eat a ball of rice. Startled, because I don't even like rice, and I look across the street, and I see this middle-aged white man standing on his porch and giving me the middle finger. His name is Mr. Bazooka, and every morning I go to school, I have to pass by Mr. Bazooka's house, and he's always cursing me out and giving me the middle finger. I'm starting to feel really uncomfortable. And I tell Mom and Dad, and one day to confront him. And the following afternoon, someone threw a brick through my parents' window. Luckily, no one got hurt. After that incident, we stood out like a yellow post-it on a white picket fence. Everyone called us chink, go back to China, eat a bowl of rice. You want me to break your other window? You want to die? It got so bad, my parents had to get bars for the windows and keep the porch light on all night. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, and I hated living in that neighborhood. And I begged Mom and Dad to move, but they told me, phase it out and walk the other way, the long direction to school. One day, I'm coming back home from school, and I see my neighbor across the street, Jerry, this crazy ex-Vietnam vet. And he's like, hey, kid, yeah, come here. Why? I got something for you. What? It's in my apartment. Okay. And I walk into his apartment, and he hands me a claw hammer. And he says, hey kid, next time you see that motherfucker, I want you to beat the shit out of him until he dies. I'm like, cool, thanks. Next day, I'm getting ready for school. And the long way to school is under construction. So my only alternative option is to walk past Mr. Bazooka's house. And I'm scared as shit, excuse me, because I think he's going to kill me. So I take the claw hammer that Jerry gave me. And as I'm walking closer to his house, I don't see him on his porch. I see him walking down the street. So I follow him and I take the claw hammer out of my bag. As I get closer to him, my heart is pounding out of my chest. There's pins and needles running through my veins. And I take the hammer and I clock my arm, ready to crack his head open. And suddenly, he falls to the ground face first. And I'm like, wow, that was easy. And I'm standing over him, and he's convulsing like a fish out of water. And he's like saying, help me, my pills, please help me. And I stare at him, and I see a reflection of my dad. The night that he got stabbed, helpless and scared. So I walk over to the neighbor's house, and I knock on their door. And I'm like, hey, man, call an ambulance. I think this guy's about to die. An ambulance arrives and picks up Mr. Bazooka. For the next couple of weeks, I don't see Mr. Bazooka on his porch, and I start to get worried. Is he okay? Then one day, I'm walking to school, and I see him sitting on his porch. He looks really weak. He has a robe on and holding a cane. So I walk by, and I see him struggle to get out of his chair. And he's like, yo, fucking chink, die and eat a bowl of rice. And I'm like, fucking chink, die and eat a bowl of rice? What kind of logic is that? And I smile and walk away. Eventually he died, and a Cambodian family moved in. And a year later, a Black and Hispanic family moved on my neighborhood. The fabric of hate became extinct because my neighborhood became gentrified. Every time I eat a bowl of rice, I think about my mom and dad and how they immigrated to New York from Hong Kong in 1970 for a better life, and how hatred and racism made them resilient to the challenges of being an immigrant in this country. And it made me who I am today. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, how do I start with this? Okay, you're such an amazing storyteller. Okay, someone that it's obvious that you're professional. Your voices. I mean, this was a very serious story. You were telling a very serious story throughout the whole thing, but your ability to weave humor in at times, there was several times that you had me giggling, and then I got really serious. So I almost felt guilty for laughing, but you were causing that, and that's a real craft. That's a real art. So I just want to honor your talent.
Appreciate that.
So, but it is a very serious subject matter. So here you are, your father's getting attacked. This man's attacking you, and it's simply because you're Asian. And when he falls, when Mr. Bazooka falls and you save him, you're the one that saves him, he still comes back with hate in his heart. How did that make you feel? I mean, you gave a comic ending to it, but like, does it just make you feel like I give up, or it's just him? Like, it's not everybody. It's just like, what do you think about that?
You know what, to be honest with you, at first I felt betrayed, but my parents always told me you got to be the better person. And sometimes you can't satisfy everyone. And I feel like that's how you become successful in life. Resilience. It's like, just kind of brush it off. Sometimes, what comes out one ear comes out the other. Although my parents taught me about resilience, I felt like storytelling taught me to be assertive. And I feel like during times like these, with all these Asian hate crimes happening around the city, I feel like we just need to be outspoken about what's happening and not just brush it under the rug. It's like throwing garbage on the street. It's going to circle back to you.
Yeah, very much so. And that is true. I mean, the power of storytelling, like to hear your story, I could step in your shoes, and I was getting angry, even though you were still making me laugh at times. I was deep down getting angry and sad. And I appreciate you sharing this story with us.
Thank you.
I really do. You've been a delight to work with. I want to talk about your Perscolas. Is the organization? Tell us about that.
So Perscolas is a not-for-profit organization to give inner city kids and adults an opportunity to focus on a career in technology. And although I'm not part of the organization, I have volunteered. So if you go to their website, I'm sure you'll find information on how to donate.
Yeah, well, we'll put it also in the chat too.
Okay,
so they'll have a link to it. So, definitely in support. But you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. You get to relax.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity, Melissa.
Oh, pleasure. You get to relax. We're going to bring you back at the end when we bring up the whole cast, but go take a breather. And thank you, David. Okay. Well, that concludes our first half of our show. That was Act 1. So we're going to take a 5-minute intermission. So go get a bio break, get yourself a beverage, just stretch, and we will see you back in 5 minutes. But you're going to be listening to some incredible music by Legendary, who actually is also one of our storytellers right after we come back. So you're going to see the talents of Legendary before he becomes one of our storytellers too. So much talent in this cast. Okay, thank you, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
You ain't read the papers about these skinheads trying to blow up black churches? Why? They see me as the enemy just like y'all do. You know what I'm saying? They can come to my house and sit outside my house just like anybody else can. And once my life is gone, it's gone. Can't nobody give it back to me. Not the judge, not the president, not the governor, not Captain Butt, not Jesse Jackson. They can't come to my funeral and talk pretty about how black people suffer. You understand?
Look, I think it's really time to get down to the real topic. So many people claim they're real but fake with real promise. This life that they say we product is real tarnished. Under your undergarments, feel your spirit get demolished. Now this is like Sterling getting polished, things getting abolished. Don't ever let them tell you that money replaces knowledge, cause cash with no mind only registers straight to nonsense. This is how it sounds to hear a nigga with some content. Still gotta keep it real anonymous for all my niggas that know what the bottom is. So are you praying on my downfall? What the problem is? Hating my irregular success off of my common sense. Lord knows I made some common sense. There's some things that I pray to you I'll never have to do again. In the studio ain't never had a truer friend. If Orion's in the stars, then bet your last I'm moving in.
They're saying that I don't have no hope. I look them in the eye and say no lie. My girl asking me why I'm small, because I've been so low, I gotta feel high. Looking up to God like why try? The devil on my left, the Lord on my right side. My parents never taught me how to fight pride. I gotta prove I can survive.
A lot that's happened when your feelings get mixed in things. I just wanna be friends and yours, not too deep into things. Lost or lost, but we'll find our way like I can see the light. Reverse, we fall in front of dark, no stress. An infusion Dutch around my green flower burn. Power like a black solid fist. Black lives matter, don't question it. Vibe on so electric, like lit, like big. Less thinking, let's be the ones provoke change. You say you gon' try, but they already shooting. Let's just do it, swoosh, check it off like Nike. In between her PK like pink. No peace at mine, cause we can't find peace. Arguments like political debate. You always testing my patience. Tapped in my earbuds, get saved quick. Lord knows I arose, third eye awoke. I can see through my dreams, the future's clear, bright as day. After we get past the gunpowder smoke, after they stop killing all of my bros, after we learn to love one another, tapping into the highest wave of high energy. Riding on the highest waves, high frequency.
They're saying that I don't have no hope. I look them in the eye and say no lie. My girl asking me why I'm small, because I've been so low, I gotta feel high. Looking up to God like why try? The devil on my left, the Lord on my right side. My parents never taught me how to fight pride. I gotta prove I can survive.
You ain't read the papers about these skinheads trying to blow up black churches? Why? They see me as the enemy just like y'all do. You know what I'm saying?
Well, welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you had a nice little 5 minutes. Wasn't that music amazing, Christina?
Yes.
Legendary. He had music in our last show too, and just like I love his work. It's amazing. Welcome back, everyone. We love your comments. Thank you so much for the comments that you're doing out there. And also, if you have questions for one of the storytellers, go ahead and post them, because we're going to pull those questions up in our talk back after the show, so we
Absolutely.
can. Yep. Just if you have a question about any of the storytellers so far, you want to direct it, please do. That'd be great. Also, like us. We'd like it when you like us. So it really helps us. And if you want to see any of these shows from our past, any of the singles from each one of the storytellers, our YouTube channel is amazing. Melanin Stories Matter. And I can thank Christina and Dr. Brianna Grantham for making that happen. We have our promos in there, and when you like a video, like it, because it helps the algorithm. So much to know in social. But
like, follow, and share.
Say again?
Like, follow, and share.
Like, follow, and share. That's right. So I am going to pass the torch to you as we get ready for our first storyteller of the second act. So I'll see you in a few.
But first, our environmental principle.
Environmental justice affirms the fundamental right to political, economic, cultural, and environmental self-determination of all peoples.
Alrighty. So again, I'm so excited to present industry professional, a mover and a shaker. Her name is Miss Stefanie Smith. And Stefanie is a diversity and inclusion subject matter expert who personally believes that change can occur through building effective leadership and diversity strategy. Stefanie comes to us as a proud advocate for multicultural and diversity spaces by way of New Jersey to talk about what happens when two worlds collide. And her story is called Collided Perceptions, or Divided Cultures. Take it away,
Thank you, Christina. Yes, no, I'm so excited to be here. Environment is important to our lives. It either helps or hinders, builds or breaks. In its description, environment is circumstances, conditions that surround and act upon an individual or community, ultimately determining its miasmic or systemic factors, resulting in either thriving, striving, struggling, or cessation. What if your environment was smack in between two deeply divided racial polarities, embellished with covert and blatant actions or inactions? An environment dictated by perceptions from rewritten history, Confederate culture, and systemic initiatives, leading to laws that were designed to cease or resist the civil advancement for full equal citizenship for people of color. A racially toxic and stressful environment, deeply divided along political polarities. My name is Stefanie A. Smith, and that was my environment. My story started in Birmingham, Alabama, early 80s, where bias and stereotypical beliefs were still lingering. Jim Crow laws left indignation and hatefulness governing minds and access, and danger lingering in spaces in public and also private interpersonal interactions. Okay, now, I need you to be a big girl today. My mother speaks to me. It's hot, the air is thick, and the heat is scorching. It's glistening Alabama sun is beaming. I'm walking beside my mother. My hand is being squeezed, bringing me back into the present. Do you hear me, young lady? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Then suddenly, her pace begins to thicken. My little feet slightly skip as occasionally one foot drags as she quickly walks, and then she stops, dragging me behind her. I hear the engine slowly idling behind us, its pace exactly alongside us. Do you need a ride? I feel my body being jerked. Now I'm behind my mother, and all I can see is the pleat of her white shorts. No, thank you. We're okay. I wasn't going to give you a ride anyway, you fucking nigger lover. Simultaneously, he throws some liquid. They go to peel off recklessly away from me. Look at me, panicked. My mother's looking at me, jerking me from behind her in front of her. Let me see your face. She wipes my face, quickly inspecting me. Oh, thank God, she's screaming as she's wiping away my tears, and I'm just jolted. You see, her prayers were answered, as that liquid was only beer and not the acid she feared. It could have been. You see, in Alabama, anti-miscegenation laws were actively held and enacted up until the year 2000. Although Virginia versus Loving was repealed in other states by 1967. No, really, 2000, the year I was graduating high school. That said, why were we walking? Well, after the divorce, my mother was on her own, and unfortunately, we were kicked out of yet another apartment because I was living proof of miscegenation. Neighbors were disapproving of a person of color living in their neighborhood. A white woman and a Black man, an ultimate no-no. And marrying, dare I say it, having a child in that place and time was the ultimate scarlet letter. And boy, did their stares and glares and grimaces show their disapproval. Me, by birth, a broken law. So now I'm a little bit older, roughly second grade age, home, and in the bath. You see, I'm profusely just scrubbing, angrily scrubbing at my arm, feeling successful. Oh my goodness, I can see a little bit of the white meat. And then, yes, okay, it's almost clean. And then I can see it stings and turns red and begins to bleed. Oh my God, what are you doing? My mother yells as she had just at that same time peeked into the door. As she runs in to further inspect some more, her voice startling me, and I don't stop as I'm still scrubbing. I'm just trying to get the dirt off. They said I was dirty, and I just can't get the dirt off. Mommy, I'm just trying to get the dirt off. My mother instantly begins to cry and kneels beside me. No, baby, you're clean, as she takes the cloth from my hand. Now, you see, Alabama law and policies and practices and procedures upheld place and spaces where one half of my blood, I was entirely unprotected by law or custom and considered to be property or undeserving, dirty, and subhuman. And the other half, my white half, engulfed me with culture and images that were happy, smiling, it's a wonderful life, and everything that was not me. This environment left me grasping for an understanding as the racial tension, that uncertainty, that intolerance that continued to build around me, around us, affecting my family altogether separate, but yet very, very different ways. You see, living between two cultures, separated by laws, stereotypes, oppression, and yet constantly given a gaze to perform to a drastic perceptual differences. It's different. You see, this time I was home in Christmas. The lights are twinkling in my room. I'm surrounded by my strawberry shortcake themed room, playing with my dolls and my tea set and my crayons, all at the same time. I was a multitasker back then, even way back then. But I'm listening hard, as I've learned to be very vigilant. At any moment, things could change, and did change. Damn it, not again. I can hear my mother in the other room. I listen harder. These fucking people, what? Whoa, what are we gonna do for food? I'm not sure who or how they found out. Yeah. Well, once they said Stefanie's name, I told them to go to hell. I didn't want the fucking job anyways, and I walked out. I heard my name. At 10 a.m., I quickly scuttled over to the corner to get a better look. I stare at my mother as she's speaking into the phone, frustrated and crying. Well, fuck them. This is my daughter. But damn it, we just got this apartment. Now fired again. Yeah, I'll get a paper tomorrow and look. What about me? What did I do? Whatever it was, I hope I don't do it again. And it was then I started to correlate my presence and the occurrence of these issues, the stares, the glares, the problems. Growing up as in this white culture in these tense times were inevitable, as the environment I grew up was riddled with pockets of hidden dangers without warning, making it living between two colliding cultures extremely difficult without understanding. You see, when I stepped into the world, I was unprepared, unprotected from its polarities, the clash, and even how to respond, especially as I constantly, unknowingly stepped onto the landmine of covert and even overt racism. Fast forward 10 years in Daphne, Alabama, a new city and a new start. A new environment. However, a few days quickly, I noticed the dangers. My surroundings changed from a bustling city of Birmingham to backwoods, large cotton fields, Southern Antebellum culture. This environment was even accompanied by big, large columned houses and the wraparound porches and even bigger weeping willow trees that formerly adorn the strange fruit that Billie Holiday sang of. And there was this thick feeling everywhere you went. It was felt. No one actually spoke of it. But this difference was so prevalent. It was awesome, treated just hush hush. This thick feeling of you don't belong here. Now, in middle school, Daphne High, the wealthy area of a 5A football school, Southern Belle Jubilee City, self-described as an active, family-oriented community blessed with beautiful scenery, rich history, and a strong quality of life. Quality of life. Quality of life. My science teacher felt it was important to yell to everyone every day that my grade in her class was a F, through the guise of saying my name. Stefanie with an F in my class, come up here. And all the class would snicker right behind her. You see, scenarios like these repeated many times. Some's like the classroom, or some even worse, like crosses being burnt in our yard, or backhanded comments and racist microaggressions, breeding disdain, hate, and confusion, causing a rift in the peace that all humans deserve. At 22, I boarded a Greyhound, and I left Alabama for good, swearing never to return. During the journey, I felt an indescribable euphoria as the bus went from state to state, further away from the Southern Antebellum South. You know, after some years, I didn't realize that I didn't have a terminology, what to speak of what that thick feeling, miasmic was. I didn't know I had the power to stand up against situations like these. Over time, in this new environment, my whole world turned upside down to land right side up. In a divine intervention, I reunited with my father and his side of the family. I did the work and I took the time to not only find my identity in my African American culture, but also search for the truth instead of just listening to what was surrounding rhetoric. I had to unlearn the products of my racist Alabama environment, especially the tenets of meritocracy and bootstrapping concepts I was told to aspire for. Work hard, keep your nose clean, and keep your head down without question. But I wasn't whole until I asked those questions, until I spoke up for myself and was taken under the wing of different supportive family members, African American circles. It wasn't until I reflected and I saw a mirror of myself. And when I received my Black experience, negating all of the hateful, double-edged, biting culture that I found in my childhood years. Achieving stability and equal access to the same value and human decency and mentally stability is linked in our environments. Our environments are made due to our social policies, practices, and beliefs that we uphold in our conscious and unconscious beliefs. So I close you with this one question. Look at your practices, look at your thoughts, beliefs, and what kind of environment are you practicing and making? Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Stefanie. That was a roller coaster of a story. I can't even begin to imagine, and it breaks my heart to imagine you as a little girl, but it gives me so much hope to see the amazing woman that you are now. I hear a story of growth and empowerment and of being made free and being made whole. And so talking about empowerment, I know that this has influenced a lot of the work that you do, but it also is influencing who you're hoping to raise funds for tonight. Could you tell us a little bit more about the National Urban Fellows?
Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, National Urban Fellows is part of the story. National Urban Fellows develops accomplished and courageous professionals of all ethnic and racial backgrounds, particularly people of color and women. And what they do is they develop them to be leaders and change agents in the public and nonprofit sectors. And so by giving your access to a master's in public administration. And if National Urban Fellows, when I was selected in the year 2014, I moved from Boston to New York, and I did my second master's thesis on the social determinants of multiculturalism. I was always an advocate for the point of view of being stuck between the two, because I could see the vantage point, of sitting between the two. And I had to fight for that concept then, and 3 years later, and now it's very relevant. So I'm glad to be a part of National Urban Fellows. Please check them out. They are now in Georgetown, and shameless plug. It's an amazing program.
Yeah, there is a saying that when someone is multicultural in their identity or biracial, it's like having a pair of magical shoes that lets you jump between worlds. So we can definitely see that. So thank you so much for your story, for opening the door for yourself and bringing as many people as you can with you along the way. It's time for you to rest, but we look forward to hearing more from you at the post show, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you. And I call that a chameleon. So yes, thank you very much for being here.
All right. Thank you, Steph.
Environmental justice demands that public policy be based on mutual respect and justice for all peoples, free from any form of discrimination or bias.
So this next storyteller is going to share a story that is incredibly relevant, especially in this past year and in this past week with what we saw with the verdict. And I am so grateful because, first off, he's so talented. You heard his music.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dashawn. And he and I actually live basically in the same neighborhood. And I did a little research. It's Issaquah, Washington, and it's 65% white to 2.4% black.
Dang.
And yeah, I had to find out.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And so this story, Dashawn, I'm so grateful that you're going to share it. And listen up, everybody. It's an important story from a firsthand experience. And I'll not go any further, but please welcome Dashawn, which is the story we call DWB, Driving While Black. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I am very honored to be able to share my story with among all the great storytellers that we have here today. And it just is very important that I get to, say this, especially for Black people, male or female of all different ages, have gone through this in a greater sense or a less of a greater sense. And to start my story off, it was March 2018. I had just gotten off work at Microsoft at the time. The sun was out. The skies were completely clear. I had just gotten into my 2005 silver Chevy Impala, and I was ready to kick my feet up. And as I got close to home, which is Issaquah, as she just noted, is primarily a white and wealthy, well-off, sense of town where there's kind of no real sense of reality. It's la la land, especially comparing to 3 years prior. I was moving from different places in South Seattle, which people would classify as urban or the hood in certain places. But as I was getting close to home, coming up I-90, around exit 15, a white driver in a red Toyota with clear windows dangerously zoomed past me, going at least 80 miles per hour. As I tried merging to the end of the carpool lane, which was now open to all vehicles, suddenly police lights and sirens blared behind me. Deeply confused as to why I was getting pulled over and not the white speed demon in the Toyota, my anxiety and fear began to grow as I was pulling over. In a mere moment, I flashed back to being a kid, 8 years old, in the back of my mom's car, confused to my mom's apprehension of being pulled over. Growing up, my mom always taught me two things. Being Black in America isn't fair. 1. 2, certain things would be harder for me. She also taught me to have appropriate fear for the police, especially while driving, to remain silent unless spoken to, turn off all music, and keep your hands on the wheel no matter what, unless you are extremely instructed. I'll never forget the nerves my mom felt growing up when she was pulled over in her 1997 cherry red Cadillac DeVille. Me and my moms were jamming out to some music on a late night drive. It was a good time. We were in extremely high spirits and just really had no care in the world. When out of nowhere, we saw police lights flickering behind us. Suddenly, as my mom turned her music down, 8-year-old me noticed her energy dropped from jovial and happy to nervous and anxious. Once more, this time in a way more serious tone, she broke down the protocols on how to behave around police officers. As I watched her do the protocols and assume the positions of carefully yet firmly placing her hands on the wheel, as she spoke to the officer, I could sense the fear in her heart. Lessons in visual representation I will keep with me forever. And so then, snapping back to my current situation, I turned my music down, rolled my window down, and firmly placed my hands on the wheel as well. Upon walking up to my driver's side window, the officer asked for my ID and registration, which I handed him over. And at that moment, I apprehensively asked the officer, "What did I do by chance to get pulled over, officer?" To which I got an emotionless, quick glare of silence as he began walking off with my information. Hands still firmly on the wheel, my anxiety, confusion, fear, and slight embarrassment continued to grow. About 3 minutes passed until the officer returned, this time to tap on my passenger side window, which I promptly rolled down for him. And again, this time asking him, what did I do wrong? And if I could possibly receive my information back. To which he boldly and aggressively said, "For speeding," and to hold on. Now giving me a slight inkling, he's just trying to make my day way more difficult. And knowing my legal rights for speeding, I then asked the officer if I could know how fast I was going to be pulled over. To which, in a derogatory tone, he said he didn't have to tell me, and that it'd be on my ticket. Now deeply confused, slightly embarrassed, and definitely growing more enraged and pissed off, I couldn't understand how I was getting a speeding ticket when at max I was only driving 65 miles per hour. As the officer handed me my information back with the ticket attached, in a slightly Midwest accent and heavily racial undertone, he told me, "Next time, don't be so mouthy to a police officer, boy." At this point, completely disgusted, completely enraged, and at a loss for words, I felt useless. I felt helpless as I could do nothing as this bigoted officer walked away. As I received the ticket, I saw it was for driving in the carpool lane, 1, and driving 78 miles per hour, 2, which all wasn't true. After yet another glimpse in my life of being treated unfairly and less than equal, I knew I had to contest this ticket. So after a pissed off, enraged, emotional wait to finally contest the ticket in court, I got everything dropped finally. Happy to be done with the situation, I was deeply saddened to think how purposeful of an inconvenience this officer knowingly made things for me. While in his mindset, I'm sure he was just wanted to put me back in my place. But it was just further proof that no matter where you go, how far you come, how peaceful you are, and all the obstacles you may overcome in your life, you're always at risk for discrimination or police harassment when you're driving while Black. And that is the end of my story. And I hope you guys can relate.
Yeah. No. I can't relate. And that's why I was getting angry, because I have heard this story a few times from a few of my Black male friends. They've all been pulled over. One guy told us on Clubhouse that he got pulled over 4 times a week because he had dreads 4 times a week. And so no, I don't. I live in your area. I don't get pulled over. I'm sorry. Like when he called you boy, that just makes me want to like hit the roof. And I, so, okay. So this week, okay, we had a verdict that we had a good work. We had a good verdict for something that's horrible. So it's not really that good. It's like, good, you got the verdict right, but George Floyd still not walking this planet.
Exactly.
And right. So I want to hear your thoughts about that. And then also I want to know, after what we've been seeing a lot in 2020 and longer, we know this, we know that there's been going on. But did you fear for your life during that incident?
To answer the first question on the George Floyd trial, and the verdict, I definitely feel, it's sad, like you said, because a man lost his life for us to have a visual representation of what America has done to us for generations. And this is not the first time it's been done on camera, but I'm glad it was able to move a lot of people. I personally feel with the verdict, I'm happy that it happened the way it did. But at the same time, as long as deliberation as it took to make it happen for something so blatant and obvious, it just goes to show that our justice system does not have much justice for people of melanin, people of Black descent, African descent, and even Latino descent, Native American descent. And the way I feel is, like we've talked about this before, that it's great, but honestly, I feel like it was just them sacrificing one of their own to appease us, because during this time that it has happened, over 76 people have been of urban descent have been murdered during that trial. And there has to be a change in the system. There has to be a change in the plight of what justice is. And at the end of the day, we have to really see change. And to answer your second question, I felt fear. I knew that I didn't know how it was going to go. And with that, and like I told you, as I said in my story, my mom giving me those lessons early on, that, as a Black man, you are fearful and you are ready to expect anything. So at at one point when he took my information back, I wasn't sure how he was going to come back and what level of aggression he was going to show, because he had already shown me a different level of his authority already.
He was a bully.
Yeah.
He was.
And I just really hope that people can take from that story and everybody's stories tonight, that the differences can bring us together, and that these discriminations and these injustices and sometimes these outlooks are things that we need to hear so we can change our lives.
That's right. That's right. And I just also want to add to this that no parent should have to give the talk to their kids about not getting murdered by the police. No parent. Okay. And that's why I think your story is incredibly important, and you are so talented. And thank you. Thank you. I'm glad we're neighbors. And when we're free, can we get some coffee at the Issaquah Coffee House or something?
Yes, I would love that.
I would love that.
Yes.
Get us out of captivity.
Yes.
So COVID is okay. But thank you again for your talents and your contribution. Okay.
And thank you guys so much for having me. Just had to say that. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Our pleasure. And thank you to Stacy who linked us, Stacy Heller. All roads lead to Stacy. We love you. Cool. Okay, so you can go relax for a little bit. Then we're going to bring you back for the talk back. So if you have a question for Dashawn, please put it in the comments, and we'll get ready for our talk back. So thank you again. And next up, we will have our final storyteller, and they'll be introduced by, actually by himself in a way, and Christina. Okay, thank you.
Environmental justice demands the right to participate as equal partners at every level of decision making, including the needs assessment, planning, implementation, enforcement, and evaluation.
Yes, yes. So, good evening, everyone. Last but not least, as you've heard his voice in the environmental principles, let us hear him again as he brings us his story, Mr. Viet Mai. He is a social innovation strategist from San Diego, California, who helps groups build peace and design impact through culture and conversation. In addition, he is a career educator and spoken word artist who works as the program facilitator for the Village of Promise Collective Mentoring Program. As I said, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Viet Mai with the Prison Pipeline.
Ever since Sesame Street premiered on PBS in 1969, they've been on the cutting edge of public programming, teaching wide-eyed kids pretty much everything they need to know by the age of 6. The Count taught me how to count and feel powerful afterwards. I learned C is for cookie, and that's good enough for me. When Mr. Hooper died, I understood my next-door neighbor, Mr. Dan, wasn't coming back. You see, Sesame Street always had this way of simplifying real-life situations I could relate to, but I didn't think that it would continue to teach me as a grown-up. I stumbled upon Little Children, Big Challenges, an initiative to build resiliency in 2 to 5-year-olds facing adversity. Meet Alex, the new kid on Sesame Street whose dad isn't around because he's incarcerated. And my heart sank. Like a shiny penny tossed in a well that hasn't fulfilled wishes since the war on drugs. I work with a mentoring program designed to break the cycle of incarceration. Every workshop trains kids how to be stronger than a power-hungry police officer. Every field trip puts footprints in directions that don't follow their parents into the injustice system. It is my job to teach them that they are valuable, worthy of love. But they are far more likely to be arrested in America than anywhere else in the world. So I encourage them to see every day as the most important day of their lives, but it concerns me that there are Muppets. Also teaching our kids how to cope with incarceration. When did prison become part of the preschool curriculum? Sesame Street seemed to understand that the prison industrial complex invests more money for our kids than the state does. And the public school system isn't designed to deal with post-traumatic stress of midnight raids and stolen superheroes turned into villains. Who would tell the children that their parents are not monsters? What authority does a teacher have over a parent's role behind bars? When teachers call school police to drag students out of classrooms like belligerent bar drunks, school starts to feel like a draft to the penitentiary or a pipeline to a 13th Amendment loophole. You see, Sesame Street seems to understand the militarization of our neighborhoods, our borders, and schools. What's next? Will Big Bird have a song called Hands Up, hoping they won't shoot him for his clipped wings? Will Cookie Monster have to tell us that the police are always in interrogation mode and everything you say can and will be used against you, and that they will profile him for something as silly as his last name? You see, Sesame Street is where a lot of us grew up learning the essentials to everyday life. At what point did we realize that everyday life includes 2.7 million children with parents locked up? And that's an 80% increase in only 20 years. So if we don't do something more than just Muppets, 70% of them are likely to get swallowed up too. I hope Alex beats the odds against him and makes it out of Sesame Street to become far greater than the weight of his childhood.
Snaps. Thank you so much. Wow. Who knew that Sesame Street was no longer just sunny days? Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Viet.
Thank you.
For those of us who don't know, could you tell us a little bit more about what the school to prison pipeline is?
Yes. In order to really, let's quick history lesson.
Go ahead.
The public school system was formed right after emancipation. And this was in response to the formerly enslaved people, Black people, recognizing that education was the next step to freedom, like true freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was, so there were no school systems, right? A lot of young people were working farms and they were working with their parents, right? And what happened is even the poor white people didn't really care for mass education, right? They were there was this the system. And so as Black people were educating themselves in private schools, now these were churches, right? Freedom schools. The powers that be came in and said, okay, well, we're going to design a curriculum called industrial education. Whereas Black people wanted more classical education, which would be maybe liberal studies that we would consider now, right? So philosophy, literature, Latin, all these things that even lawyers have to take, right, in today's society. Yeah. Civic engagement, civic engineering, that type of work. But then there was a debate. Are we going to do classical education or are we going to do industrial education? Now, when you think of industrial education in this current day, we only go back to maybe the automotive industry, but really it was about the agricultural industry. And so what happened after emancipation was that there was this void in the workforce because there was no more free slave labor.
Okay.
And so when they implemented industrial education, it was strictly designed to put people back into the field of the plantations and back into like service work, laundry, cleaning, just really menial work. And this was heavily pushed by the business class. So now we fast forward to today. We are still implementing this model that we're trying to get mass education, like the people that come out of our educational schools, to the workforce. We want to get jobs. So where is the part about learning how to own your own business? Where's the part about learning how to own your own property? Where's the part about learning how to, take care of your own personal health and wellness? Mm-hmm. So these are strategically not included in our public education system. And so now we are still sitting in a model where they disguise it a lot in professional development in the school system. But when I was heavily into professional development in the school system, it was about classroom management. Mm. And so you have one teacher giving all the instructions and 30 kids in a classroom, all one direction, paying attention. Yeah. And anything outside of that is defiance. And anything out of that, detention. Which kind of sounds like solitary confinement, or kind of sounds like you need to go, isolate yourself because you don't belong in this thing. And then when you look at the statistics of who's actually in the teaching, well, they're not Black and brown teachers as majority, right? There are people who are disconnected from the way communities of color, marginalized, people, and they're just being kids. Let me just emphasize that, right? Kids are just being kids no matter what. But there's a certain policing that happens in the school system that says you are not allowed to wear your hair a certain way. You are not allowed to talk a certain way. You are not allowed to laugh when the teacher's trying to be serious. This kind of policing is what is kind of the environment that our kids are growing up into. And so when we have cases where we look at reading levels at the 2nd and 3rd grade level, right? I did testing and administration. So when we're looking at test scores and we're seeing this achievement gap, well, there are prison industries, the prison industrial complex, they will use that to project how many more prisons do we need to build in order to meet that demand. I'm saying. So when they say that certain reading levels aren't up to par, they take that and they project how many people will be in prison. This is the system that we're kind of operating. This is why private prisons, and I'm glad to say that California abolished private prisons in the state of California. So that's a win, right? So there's this hashtag, schools not prisons, right? And this is this idea that we need to stop making our schools look and feel like detention facilities. And so with that, I work with a vulnerable population of young people who have a parent that has been in prison or is in prison, or even we just expanded. This is Village of Promise. And we now said, okay, if you are a child that has been affected by incarceration in your household, because we've had young people that had older brothers, they had uncles, so a lot of this is stuff that we're trying to break the cycle of, right? We're trying to ensure that even though they may have a missing parent, they still have a supportive community and a village around them. And that's what the collective mentoring model is about. It's not one-on-one. We actually operate as a team of volunteer mentors. We do summer camps, we do monthly workshops, and we used to do monthly outings before COVID. And now we just try to do the workshops online. But we do a lot of other things like service work, right? So we understand that part of giving back is to help ourselves and understand that we also have a power to contribute to the community, even if we're lacking resources ourselves. The spirit of collaboration and community is absolutely necessary. We don't do the individualized thing. We don't preach like, you got to pull yourself up for your bootstrap. There's an ideology there that says your destination is your fault. And that's just simply not true. We need each other, right? We try to apply this model of self determination, and we have vulnerable populations that don't grow up in the same environments that we assume young people grow up in.
Yeah, there's so in the US, there's this idea of happiness is of the individual, but in most cultures of the global South or people of color, we're very collectivist. Like it's all community based. Like it's not you alone. Everything that happens to you is always connected to the people that you're in relationship with. So it makes a lot of sense. And I'm so excited that Village of Hope exists. Sorry, did I say that right? Village of Promise, sorry. And for those watching, in the comments below, you will see a link to where you can support this organization and the good work that Mr. Viet's doing. Thank you so much for your spoken word piece. We will have time for more and for questions in our Q&A in just a minute. But now I want to pass it on to Melissa so she can give a little bit word about our sponsors and the wrapping up of our show.
Mm. Wow, Christina, thank you. It was a joy co-hosting this show with you, and to all the storytellers and to the audience out there, thank you. Thank you for being a part of it. You could have been anywhere and you chose to be with us. And that is amazing and beautiful. And that's why we're here. Melanin Stories Matter is all about elevating these voices, these stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and having respectful, thoughtful, and hopefully inspiring conversations for us to be better, to make change, social impact. So I want to thank everyone. I also wanted to say that we're constantly casting. So if you go to our website, melaninstoriesmatter.com, there is a pitch line. So if you want to submit your story, please do. We're going to be looking at it. We have a few more shows, as you saw. We have Growing Up BIPOC in August, and we also have Indigenous Honor in October. And so I want to thank our sponsors. Particularly, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Brianna Grantham, who all of these pictures and things that you're seeing on the screen that are moving and the comments that you see in the subjects going on in YouTube, that's Brianna. She's literally been landing and taking airplanes up and down all night, and she's just wonderful with BJG Consulting. And then Christina with her work as an advisor, co-host, and with your own business, Visual Stories by K. KNKX, thank you so much for being such a wonderful, wonderful sponsor. We're so grateful. And my friends at Story Jam and Founders Live and Thousand Cuts, we appreciate you too. I want to give a little shout out too to some of you out there in the audience. You had a chance to buy a ticket. You chose to buy a little more to give support, and you're known as our allies. And so I want to say thank you to Matthew S., Stefanie R., I know who Steffi is, Angela W., Anonymous Allosaurus, love that, Joe Y., Anu S., I know Anu, Cindy K., I know Cindy, Carol S., Steve W., Margaret L., Juliana A., and Coral C. Thank you. Thank you for that extra giving. We appreciate it, and your participation with us. It's just great. Thank you. So that is it. That is a close for this particular show. However, wait, there's more. We are going to bring the audience in, and you can meet the storytellers. So we're officially concluded the environmental racism show. As you can see, this is a subject matter that we will continue to explore and to unpack in our future shows because it's everywhere. And it's microaggressions to big landfill issues. And so thank you. Hey, storytellers.
Hey.
You handsome, beautiful cast. Look at you. Oh, look at them. Oh, every single one of them. They're like, we've become family here at Melanin Stories Matter, and it's just so wonderful. I'm going to lay low a little bit. I think this is a great time for the audience to ask a question if there's a particular story that you want to ask. And we have one. Thank you, Matthew Spadoni. It's for David. You mentioned your neighborhood diversifying and that things were getting better. Has the COVID brought back more open racism in your area and life like it has for many others around the country?
Ironically, my parents still live in the house I grew up in, and I haven't seen any racism on the block I live in. However, it's in the news. It's happening around the city. And one of the initial stories I was going to work on for the show was about my experience with casual racism and microaggressions in the workplace. I feel like that's, I don't know if it's related to COVID, but it's something that has been happening ever since I started my career 20 years ago.
Well, David, when we first met, I have a question for you too. Yeah. Was that when we first met, you had done a post right after the Stop Asian Hate movement really started to get some traction and people were waking up, it appeared, about some corporate environment situations that you've had. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So my day job, I'm a computer trainer / desktop support, and I feel like ever since we were all forced to work from home March of last year, I saw a difference in how people treated me, because I deal with people all the time with different various issues, regarding computers, and I never kind of like put my hands on why people treated me differently from working from home compared to the office. And ever since all these Asian hate crimes started happening around the city, I started to reflect more about, what I experienced, growing up in the Bronx. And I realized maybe I'm being judged by the color of my skin compared to the service I provide them. Because when you're working from home, I mean, you can't see, you're pretty much, the only perception you have is by one's voice. But it's like you're not looking at the person. Yeah. That makes sense.
So you felt safer at home since COVID and quarantine?
I do. So I brought this up to my manager and I spoke to people about it. And I feel like it just needed to be addressed. And my manager ironically said, you know what? I'm sorry this is happening. I can't experience it because he's a white man. But he said, I'm happy you brought it up. And he said, although I can't change it on a larger scale, I mean, if this is an individual incident, I support you in addressing it. But my next challenge is, how do I address this as a bigger picture, as a cultural change? So I think that's my next challenge. But this is a good stepping stone.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Appreciate it.
We have a question from storytelling naturalist Coral Conant Giles. And she says, wow, thank you for that story, Mr. Viet. I'm familiar with the school to prison pipeline from a current day perspective. Do you have any reading, podcast, video recommendations for learning that history?
Yes, there's a book that it was required reading for my master's program, and it's called Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935, and it's by Anderson, James D. et al. I believe we'll put the link. Once again, the title is Education of Blacks in the South, and there's more. 1860 to 1935 by Anderson. And in that class, we actually it was set up as a what do you call it, study abroad, but we actually went to New Orleans and then up to Philadelphia. So we basically traced the Underground Railroad and learned about New Orleans culture, and then went up to Philadelphia, which was a free state at the time, and looked at some of the freedom schools that were happening and learned about the whole abolition process. And if you ever get a chance to visit in, I believe, Maryland, there's the Harriet Tubman Museum, and it is phenomenal. So make sure you try to check that out if you're ever in the DC DMV area. And yeah, I hope this helps further the education of how our school system was actually designed to do, what we're frustrated about. And so, we need to kind of be mindful of that when we're thinking about particularly culturally relevant pedagogy.
This is also a time for you guys to ask questions to each other too. So just saying.
I would like to say, Stefanie, your story was very impactful to me, and everybody's was, of course. I just have to say that everybody's was. But I have family that lives in Alabama. My aunt, and my favorite aunt, and her daughter lives in Alabama at the moment. And just, and just hearing the story and the sheer ignorance and the craziness that's going on that you experienced over there. And I know how not too far separated it is from now, and I just, it really touched me so much. And I just want to say thank you. And everybody's story, I feel like everybody has so many great experiences, journeys, and things that they contributed to this. And I really appreciate that. Thank you all.
Oh, Dashawn, thank you so much. Absolutely. Matter of fact, I straddled both states of Georgia and Alabama. So my white people are in Alabama, my Black people are in Georgia.
Yeah.
And and so that's why I'm a diversity practitioner. Particularly, I am the founder of Smith Squared and Associates, where we do diversity consulting and actually give diversity coaching to executives that are looking for not only training, but also a little bit more to chew on and some more space to really fully comprehend what's going on. And my vantage point of sitting between, two cultures is something of like an anomaly. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Of course.
I really enjoyed all the stories as well.
It was great. It was incredible. Oh, man.
Looks like Matthew has a question. It says, for those at MSM, how can we elevate these stories in the recording?
That's so nice. So we are going to have a cleaned up version, where we could just make it nice and clean and polished, and that'll come out in a couple weeks. But yes, return back to our Melanin Stories Matter YouTube, where we will have not only the whole show, but we'll have each one of these storytellers in their own separate stories, so that you guys can send it out onto your networks as well, and do be proud of your work that you did here. That's what we need to do. We need to keep spreading it out. We're also doing a podcast, and so you will be getting a call from me because I'm going to want to interview you. And we're moving into some other levels of ways that we want to continue to elevate these stories across a multitude of media. So start with YouTube. Melanin Stories Matter on YouTube. Anything you'd want to add to that, marketing friend? Did I get it? Okay. But we're also on Instagram. We're on Twitter. I think Instagram and YouTube are our two strongest, and Facebook and Twitter.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn.
And Pinterest.
And Pinterest.
Okay, interesting.
We're social.
That's awesome.
So I saw a new comment. It was in the comment. A new question. It says, I'm curious if any of you have discussed your experiences and stories with young adults, whether in your family or otherwise. If so, what is that like, and how did they receive the conversation? Oh, there it comes.
Well, anybody want to start? I'm sorry.
You go.
Yes, go to Sean.
Well, I was gonna say I used to do, and especially before COVID, I did youth coaching anywhere from third grade all the way to senior year, and I did training with college students for basketball primarily, and also a little bit of football. But in that, I definitely got a chance to really speak to some of these kids. And as well as before COVID, I did community outreach, charity, and a bunch of stuff, clothes drives, school repair for elementaries for their recess parks and stuff like that. And even still talking just to these kids about certain things and educating them, because everything is so lit, or everything is so just non-serious anymore for these kids, that having to, really remind them and teach them, that these are certain principles of life, on how to behave around police officers, or, the history of Fred Hamptons, the Malcolm X's, the people that came in before of indignation, teaching them about the Angela Davises, how to respect your parents even, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes we, and, me being in the coaching thing, I, get a multitude of different people from, or kids from different ethnicity backgrounds, whether it's Latino, white, Black, whatever, and and having that camaraderie for a sport together and teaching them that unity is so important, but in the same breath letting them know all the indignations and the degradations before that have happened for generations before. And I'm a young dude, I'm about to turn 26 in June, and so and so I just think to myself that, damn, like we're so far ahead, but mentally we're so far behind. You know what I'm saying? From where we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act. And really it starts with this next generation and the generation of now to change from 60 years ago, Civil War, we're still having the same shit happen, or things happen, and so, we have to start with the youth. And so I'm glad that they've been accepted, and that's what I teach them in my conversations personally.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Dashawn was saying, actually, I've developed a youth program where I would love to maybe pilot it a couple of times. Is thinking about conscious thinking. If we help people understand what's happening unconsciously, because we all feel subconsciously like, oh no, I don't act racist, I don't act this way, or but forgetting that it's just human nature to have bias. And it's just, bias is not a negative word. Like, we all have bias. It's managing our bias and understanding what that would be. Personally, I would love to do more speaking to youth. I kind of feel like race and racism has finally come to a point where it's believed, and it's not like this miasmic theory of like, oh, that's not what we really meant. And so now that it's more accustomed and more seen and more heard and understood, I would love to do more youth speaking, and send them my way.
Yes.
So my experience is way different because we don't talk about racism in the Caribbean. That's just not a topic that is for discussion. We just barely even talk about African American history, or American history for that matter. It's mostly cultural things that we learn. And because most of the people that are there look like me, and they talk like me, and they sound like me, we don't know about the extent of what racism is and what it does and what it causes and where it comes from until we come to the mainland and we have an experience, or we hear a story, or we watch the news, and then it's like, whoa, what is this? And why is it such a big deal? Because that's not the experience that we have back home, because we all look alike. And even people that look like you, Stefanie, or that look like Melissa, or that look like Christina, because we're in that melting pot and we've already accepted people, mostly because we're in this little pot together. We don't have that experience. We don't have an issue with you being white, you being Black, you being Asian American, you being Latino. The way we look at it, either you're from the Caribbean or you're not from the Caribbean. That's the bias that you're talking about. So that whole environment thing, that's our environment. You're either from the Caribbean or you're a Yankee. And that's just the way that I grew up. And me, the way that I'm speaking to you now, I would be considered a Yankee because now I don't have an accent. I don't sound like them, or I'm speaking too properly. I'm not dropping my R's and hardening my A's. So that's the bias. I don't know that it's necessarily racism in the idea that most people have of racism right now, but it is a separatism. It is an exclusivism. You know what I'm trying to say? To whereas I look at this person differently because they sound different, not necessarily because they look different.
Yeah.
And the way that they act might be a little different, but it's more so cultural than I just hate this person, which is what I understand racism to be, is as it's a hate for something that you don't understand.
It's a hate in the action.
We don't understand it, but we don't hate it. So I don't know. There's really not a lot of discussion about racism in the Caribbean that I know.
And to your point, someone just put in the comments, they're like, interesting. I think most mainlanders wouldn't know that Puerto Rico was the U.S. and with U.S. citizens. But I agree. We hear more about Puerto Rico than the other islands.
Virgin Islands.
Well,
the Virgin Islands.
So again, that's the.
Wait, Abel's talking, but he's very soft. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also important to be aware of the framing, right? Like to talk about the mainland. presupposes a subland, right? Instead of claiming like each land as their own main, like we all belong to somewhere. We are not subdivisions of a continent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we also need to be conscious about like how we name things and how we name ourselves within those frameworks. Just to like name it for what they are.
Yeah. And if I could add a little thing, what Arlene says is very true. In Caribbean, it's not, in present day Caribbean, it's not so much about color. It is a lot about culture. It's what Abel was saying, it's colorism and culture. Like it has to do with colorism and culturalism. It's about who gets the most advantages, but it's so subtle. It's so subtle that we don't see it and we don't talk about it because it's institutionalized. It's been woven so much in our thread because our history is so long that we don't see it anymore. And so unless you step outside of your island and see something different, you don't begin to recognize it. You don't begin to see how all the newscasters are fairer, and you very rarely see a Black newscaster, for example. Or like it's hard for me to give examples because, again, like I'm here too. It's like I didn't start thinking about racism until I moved to the States and experienced it. And then when I came home, then I could start to see the very little ways in which it expressed itself in my own culture. But again, our history with race, like our present day history, has no violence. Like I met a Black lady in the post office the other day from California, and she said, I moved to Puerto Rico because here y'all police don't kill Black people. And I'm like, because we're all Black here, quote unquote.
Right. And if it does happen, it's not because the person is Black. It's because of a crime that was committed. The violence that happens against other Black people is because of the so-called gang, or you live in this neighborhood versus that neighborhood. It's not because you're Black. It's not because you're Asian. It's not because you're Latino. So, like Christina said, it's subtle, but it's there, but not to the extent as it is here.
And to the point, and to my cast point, the whole concept of the diaspora and where we are, even in the colorism versus racism, it is all intertwined. There's an amazing 4-part documentary on HBO Max called Exterminate All the Brutes. And it really tells truth to all the way back to, I think, well before like 1717 and Spanish trade, and how, the whole United States was taken. All this land was taken from indigenous people, and calling, the original inhabitants brutes and taking
savages
from them and from us, and then we are where we are today. But it's an amazing 4-part series that it actually puts together pieces that we don't even know. And to everyone's point, the whole concept of race and racism and racist acts are more beyond just what we see. We're needing to get into the mental human nature and human, triggers and actions and thoughts that are, becoming our cultural norms and our cultural policies and our practices. And we can write things down all day. It's what we do every day, the minutes that feed the hours, that feed the weeks, that feeds the days, that feeds the years.
You said that was on HBO, Stefanie?
HBO Max, girl. I love my Max.
The superior.
I'm putting it in my phone so I can look it up.
Yeah, Exterminate All the Brutes. Amazing.
I want to comment on something. You made such a great point about how Black history is American history. And as a first generation Vietnamese American, I own my American identity, which is to say that I also wanted to learn what that true American history is. And so when I found myself helping with Black community events and promoting Black history events, there was comments like, "Oh, but you're not Black." So as if I'm not supposed to be celebrating Black culture in America, right? The other thing I wanted to note is also how what I'm hearing here is that there's more of a classism that is happening as well between the haves and the have-nots. And it's funny how we also tend to associate upper class with whiteness, as if people of color cannot be, successful. And so even when the celebration of Black people, it's like, what are you doing, right? Like, why are you associating? And I'm like, why can't we celebrate together, right? Why can't we also honor each other for where we're at? And even because, a lot of my friends are doing well and they're Black, right? And so this, it does, for some reason, people still get confused. And even my own parents, right? Even I'm not gonna go into that dynamic, but this idea that I'm associating with the lower class, and it's just like, that's not true. That's entirely not true.
Yeah, I mean,
my mom was. Excuse me.
I was like, yeah, to your point, it all goes back to where specifically all of our concepts of what beauty was, our concept of what time, lateness, are the structural norms, are they were all made from white culture. And so that was the standard. That was the standard that they were trying to keep us out of, that they made all the laws and this, that, and the other. I feel like, to your point, to your questioning of, there's two different parts. There's the ally that is, rocking it out. And I hear you speaking from an ally's perspective of, working along together and celebrating together. But, to the whole concept of colorism, there is some pieces of racism that even are translated and modeled by people of color against, some of their own people, because it's so ingrained into the cultural norms that they've been, enriched and not enriched, but just basically surrounded for the past 300 years. Malcolm X speaks about, who told you that your skin was, ugly, who told you that your hair was bad, it's been, projected onto us that, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about that 2 points.
Yeah, and I would love to introduce, as this kind of dynamic is evolving, we can introduce new terminology, right? So yes, I'm an ally and I consider myself, and I also want to move more into the accomplice role, right? How are we going to be in this more together than rather than saying I'm an ally and therefore I'm a separate entity, but I still support you? I'm like, nah, like sometimes allyship is still divisive. And for me, if I'm going to own my own American identity and uplift Americans, whether they're Black and brown or Asian, women, trans, whatever, then I have to think more as an accomplice to say, y'all are my people too.
I love that.
And I hope
I like
could
that.
be part of it, right?
Partners in crime.
So we study this anti-racist, this notion of being more anti-racist, not just I'm not racist. And that denial is to say you're effing racist, right? And so when people can say I'm an anti-racist, then I know you're doing the work, right? And so part of this terminology that we're starting to adopt, you can kind of start to see, okay, You got my back? Cool, I got your back, right? Like that's kind of what's happening in this conversation now as we meet more. I'm going to introduce a new term, like-hearted people, right? So when we think, we're coming from different angles, different experiences, and different opinions even. But if we come from a common place of a common heart, then I think we can strategize together and not say that doesn't work for me and therefore I don't want to work with you. We can say, you know what? I can recognize your heart. There's something off there, right?
Yeah.
And then let's try to figure this out together. That's more about being an accomplice.
Yeah, I gotta say that I think all of this conversation is so important because, in my own journey, there's a doggy barking. In my own journey, as someone who's reflected, I grew up with racists. I grew up with Oklahoma kinfolk, and I didn't hear the words Black or African American. You know the word that I heard all the time. And it was taught this false narrative in my head. And I couldn't buy into it. I just couldn't buy into it. It was very disturbing naturally. And it takes a lot of strength and bravery to stand up to your family when you know something like Stefanie. I'm sure you absolutely have related to this. We've talked about this. And as someone who really, my like-hearted heart, I know how ignorant I can be sometimes, and I'm not going to tolerate it, but sometimes I'm going to trip, right? I'm going to trip. I'm going to say something that I didn't know was whatever insensitive. I'm trying though. And so I think that what I love about this group is that you guys give me that love and passion and forgiveness because my heart's in the right place. But there's shit tons of years of false narratives that a lot of us have heard. And so waking up takes practice. It takes practice. And so I'm just so grateful for this show and this platform because I get to meet you and learn more and however I can help. And whenever I'm done, tell me.
I love how we're able to give each other grace. And I think that,
yes.
Giving people grace to chew on concepts that years ago we weren't able to bring our full selves into the workplace, and we weren't able to talk about race. And there were a lot of different concepts that were very, excluding. And so there are generational differences in thinking that nothing but storytelling and communication and discussion is going. Nothing else but having these things happen is going to unfold these things. So the more we talk, the more grace we give, the more, okay, I understand I'm not going to say it right the first time, but just give me some grace so we can work through this together. I think as a human species is how we're going to get to the other side.
Boom. Yeah. Thank you. The fact that there's diversity, equity, and inclusion divisions of companies, of master's degrees, that's progress. That's progress. And the people that work within those divisions that I have seen, because I talk to corporate sponsors and whatnot, they're the most evolved. They are incredibly powerful, passionate people. And that you wouldn't have seen that in the 50s, 60s,
right.
70s, 80s.
And it's the policies that come from these ideas that make, our environmental, structure and policies that go against, the environment for our water, our policies on who's going to get FEMA, support, and then also hate crimes. And so it's all one big circle.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to know that it's okay to say, in light of this new thing that I've learned or this story that I've heard, I've changed the way I see the world, and I've changed my mind about what I thought before. But I also think it's incredibly healthy to say, I know you're on a journey, but I can't meet you right now in this space. I'm going to step away and set a healthy boundary. And if I'm able to, I'll come back later. And if I'm not, then maybe you'll connect with other people who can help you on that journey, because we also have to take care of ourselves and know that it's okay to say no. And it's okay to say, I've changed the way I see the world,
Yeah.
I would love to hear from everybody just a thought similar to what Christina just said of how you're feeling about this, about how we can be allies together, you know, as for each other. Dashawn?
Accomplices.
Accomplices.
Yeah. I personally feel, that if we stay focused, put our hands together, really, address these problems and hold these people in power accountable, and the things we can do right now as individuals, really sitting here on the stream, just really stay in contact, give each other information, and, really, if any ally is needed, definitely reach out and help, be a helping hand, be somebody who, can be the spine, can be some support to somebody. So definitely.
Thank you. Abel, because he's probably almost asleep. It's 4 a.m. Yeah, we're going to wind down in just a couple. Wow. We'll just go around and then you're free to go to the land of Nod.
No, but that's a great question. I think that if we frame it as accomplices, right? An accomplice risks something of their own to be present. So when we frame it like that, we don't want people standing next to us. We want people standing in front of us saying, like, we know this is, and we know that there is a heightened risk for you all. So we're gonna step up. That's an accomplice. So there is this element of personal risk, of personal involvement that doesn't benefit the oneself, and this goes in every direction, right? Be it race, be it sexuality, be it gender, be it whatever it is. Like when we step up for our siblings everywhere, we need to put our skin in the game. Like we need to risk. Otherwise, nothing comes to fruition. And I think that's very important. And the fact that, allyship, it's so many times framed as an individual effort when it should be a communal effort. It should be something that lifts everybody up, not just the one person, and it's not just a personal commitment. It's a commitment to call out structures, it's a commitment to call out institutions, it's a commitment to call out the system that is putting every single one of us down. So that's where I'm at with that.
Thank you. I was on mute. Thank you for that. And I agree completely. It's like it takes a village, right? Arlene?
Education.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just sit around and because it's not happening where I am or where I used to be. If you don't know what's going on, then how can you change something, or how can you be an advocate for change? So we need to educate ourselves, not just about the history of things that happened before for our people or Black people, but I need to know what the Asian American experience has been. I need to know what the Latino American experience has been, because like you said, like Christina mentioned, all of our threads are interwoven in the same tapestry. And at the end of the day, there's one main association, for lack of a better word, holding the scissors to cut that cord. So we need to be careful. We need to know who has the scissors and who has the needles. So we need to educate ourselves and figure out how we can keep the tapestry going so that we can stay connected.
And being open to the being aware. It starts with being aware. That's education, waking up. Yeah, that was beautiful. You're so poetic. You are beautiful. That was beautiful. David?
If you don't have a pair of scissors, or you don't have needles, you can always go order it from Amazon.prime.
Prime.com.
They're not a sponsor.
Jeff Bezos, come on, you're on our side. Yep.
I guess I would say step out of fear and step into feeling. Particularly, don't be afraid to when you feel that feeling, lean into that a little bit more and try to figure out what is around that, and try not to be easily offended. If you are offended, then lean into that. And what does those feelings represent? Something. And until we're honest with ourselves first, we're not going to be honest with anything else. My another mentor of mine, Glenn Singleton of Courageous Conversation Pacific Education Group, has a specific protocol on how to talk about race and how to have these hard conversations and meeting people where they're at. So to Arlene's point, education of self, and dive deeper.
Yeah, great. All right, in our final minute, Mr. Viet, you got a thought? I have a feeling you do.
Yes.
I'm sure he has several.
And we love his thoughts.
I'm sure you have several.
I want to emphasize the education component, and I want to also distinguish that does not mean formal education. We as individuals have to really learn about our environments, and in order to do that, we have to. I love Coral for asking the question, because she wanted to further what I was talking about, further the understanding of what I was talking about. And so, we shouldn't have to go to grad school to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
We should not have to. That's a form of elitism in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people don't have that privilege and that access. As much as I want to help educate the community, I also realize that there's that self-education as well. So when people of color, marginalized communities don't have the time and patience to educate others, don't get offended. You're not entitled to our knowledge and our feelings and our expressions. And when we express frustration, oftentimes we're met with more frustration. I don't understand why you're offended. I don't see it that way. You're not supposed to see it this way. You have to listen to the fact that I'm pissed off, period. And then ask maybe why I might be pissed off. Not, I'm not pissed off, and therefore you feeling pissed off is incorrect. That's the pushback that I'm receiving. That's the pushback that I'm seeing. And it's like, of course you're not pissed off. It doesn't affect you, right? So part of learning this frustration and building this peace is to start to say, oh, I see what your people have gone through, right? And then have that compassion to say, got it. And unfortunately, we don't have people trying to draw, we need to see the other side of the problem.
Yeah.
So, educate yourself.
Some emotional pottery going on.
That was awesome.
This is it. I'm done speaking.
He did. I'm falling apart over here. Okay. All right. Is there any other final comments? Because our audience, we still have people watching. You're wonderful, 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 and all of your giving. Thank you again. Thank you, Brianna.
Dashawn, do you have a question?
Yay, Brianna.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. I just got one shameless plug. If you did like the music, if you love the music, you can find me on Orion Radio on SoundCloud.com, Orion Radio Legendary Music. You'll find the Almighty mixtape. My last project, I'm in production right now New music coming very soon. Go ahead, follow me on Legendary 1X on all social medias, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you. We put that in the chat because I have to apologize. I was so caught up in our conversation. I
it's all
forgot
good.
to talk about that. So we got it. We're great. You're amazing. All
I
right,
appreciate
Cass,
you all.
I appreciate you all,
All of
and
you.
thank you. What'd you say? Okay, he's already on. He's already on. Look
Thank
at
you.
that. That's
Thank you. I'm
wonderful.
coming back.
I'm a man of my word.
I appreciate
All
that.
right.
Got
So
you.
we will be staying in touch. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great evening, great weekend, and let's go forth being anti-racist. Let's bond and celebrate ourselves. Thank you.
All right,
Everyone.
accomplice.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
God bless.
afternoon.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Oh, good
Take
night.
care. Be
Well, really
safe.
good night, Abel. Good night.